Starting to see folks join the webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming from. Thanks for joining, everyone. My name is Frank. We'll get started in maybe just a couple of minutes. We'll give everyone a chance to log in. Appreciate your time to coming to our webinar. For folks who just joined, thank you so much for joining the webinar. We'll get started in just about a minute. Let's see if we can get this attendee count up a couple more, and we'll kick things off. I think we'll get started. Might be a good time. Of course, we'll have this recorded as well. Sound good, Sam? We'll just get things going. Awesome.
Sounds cool. Yep.
First things first. Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today and spending the next 45 minutes with us. My name is Frank Hain. I'm on the professional services team at HashiCorp, manager of domain architecture. Very happy to have Sam Terrell on. He's our regional vice president of sales, covering the Northeast region, covering our critical Fortune 1000 accounts in that region. So definitely, Sam, thank you so much for making the time to come. I want to give everyone just a quick overview of everything here, what we're going to be talking about today. This is our second ever webinar. We're talking about transitioning into a tech career, but you're coming from a quote unquote non-traditional background. You might be in education, might be in healthcare, nursing, what have you, and you're thinking about joining tech. We're here to provide a little bit of context, hopefully some guidance, and hopefully drive a lot of interest in joining this very exciting field that all of us here are part of. So main purpose, the first one, if you folks had joined the first one, we had 4 panelists. I think we gave a really good broad overview of folks from different backgrounds joining into tech and their reasons and some tips and tricks. This time we'll have Sam on, a veteran in the tech sales world, and kind of digging a little bit deeper into transitioning into tech. And a quick overview, going through introductions as we are right now. I think just quick basics. What is sales? What is tech sales, right? We hear about that. Let's talk about that. And if you're coming from that non-traditional background, how do you translate or reframe your skills now into something relevant as you're going through that job application process? And then finally, you've made it through that application. You're an interview success, right? That's awesome. How do you best present yourself, and kind of talk through that as well. And our main goals for today, just want to educate, provide some information to the community. We definitely want to excite and support the community as well as you're going through this journey. It can be a long journey. It's not easy, but definitely fun, and we definitely want to be a part of it. So just want to provide that quick background there. So I'll stop sharing my screen so we can just see everyone here. And I think, Sam, maybe we'll just cut into it. We have mentioned, you're leading sales in the Northeast region. If you wouldn't mind giving a quick background, how you got into sales, and then maybe, how you got into HashiCorp. I think we'd all love to hear that.
Sure, absolutely. So, boy, you say veteran, it makes me feel very, very old. I'll just tell you that.
Experienced, yeah.
We like to call it seasoned. I'm a seasoned RVP. Yeah, certainly. I'm in the Northeast in New Jersey. I grew up in Michigan. After a stint in the Marines, about 6 years in the Marines, I went back to school, completed my 4-year degree from Michigan State, and then I accepted my first role as a field seller at a company called Unisys. That was kind of my first entree into the business. I went through the same thought process as probably a lot of folks on this call are in, which is boy, that really looks interesting. It seems like everything is going tech. It seems like people are doing very well in tech. It seems like a business that I want to bet my future on. And that was really the drivers. It was at a time of the dot-com boom back in the mid 90s. And that's how I made my entree into the business. I knew I didn't want to work in consumer goods. I won't call out any companies here, but had opportunities to go into consumer goods, or the automotive industry was big then, or pharma. And it seemed like the world was going tech, and I think that paid off quite nicely. So, and it continues. And so I'm sure that's what a lot of folks on this call are thinking about today.
Well, thank you, Sam, for the background. And I think just to jump into the first point of what we're talking about, you talked about, not necessarily you're interested in tech. So what is sales as you were moving up, into the role now, either from, we talk about the entry level role being like a sales development rep, going to more of an account manager, enterprise account manager. Would you mind giving me some background? What is that sales role? What does that movement look like
Sure.
for folks?
Sure, absolutely. So, if you really think about it, I mean, sales is a pretty broad topic, right? We encounter salespeople every day in our everyday lives, right? The real differences in the complexity of that sales transaction. So consumer goods sales or working in retail is not very complex. Maybe one buyer might be involved in that. The decision process may be quite simple. It may be as simple as from a financing perspective, what their credit score is, and you sign these papers and you're good. And that the duration of that might be a week, it could be 2 weeks. Maybe it's maybe a little bit more. Enterprise sales, which is the profession that I'm in, those sales cycles can be quite complex, and maybe a number of different stakeholders, folks that have some either technical influence or economic influence on that purchase. Because it's enterprise sale, the company is investing, making large investments. They could be as small as $50,000, or they could be multi-million-dollar deals over a period of 3 to 5 to 10 years in some instances. So that cycle can be extremely prolonged. It can be very complex. So from the most basic to something that might be a sales cycle of a number of years, right? That kind of determines where you fit as a sales rep. So you might start as an SDR, which is highly sales development rep. There's someone who is working with maybe inbound leads, or inside sales rep. You're getting inbound leads, following up on inquiries. You may need to do a presentation. There may be a proof of concept where the customer is going to evaluate that solution for some period of time. But typically they're high volume, low, as far as the amount of time, a very short sales cycle, right? And as I said, you'll usually a smaller dollar amount. So you'll start there, and then you'll as a sales cycle and customer requirements and technical requirements get more complex, you advance in your sales career from maybe an SDR. Maybe you are one of a corporate account manager, right? Again, deals are growing in size, growing in complexity. The amount of time required to close those deals might be extended. And then there might be a few more buyer groups that you need to understand in order to sell that deal, right? The next step would be some type of either enterprise sales or strategic enterprise sales. So those roles typically require folks that might have at least 5 years of sales experience. So the folks on my team, I'm a strategic enterprise regional vice president. Those folks have minimally 5 years, on average anywhere from 8, 10, 12 years of sales. And those sales cycles can be very long, extremely complex. At the highest end of the sales in tech, you're going to have someone that's maybe like a global account manager. So that person might only have one account. It might be Bank of America, JPMC. They're responsible for working with a number of different stakeholder groups, a number of different areas of that bank. you would have all types of senior executive sponsorship from the company involved in that transaction. And it would be a major strategic initiative that might be tied to some type of business goal. So there's a lot of different areas as far as, your role and the requirements, from, very small to very large and very complex, right? And everything.
Oh, thanks for that summary, Sam. So it sounds like, definitely from beginning to as you grow your career, there's a deal size, like dollar size. There's a complexity of the deal as well, and also kind of different moving parts too, that kind of just grows as you become more experienced. So 2 follow-on questions. Let's say someone's coming from a non-traditional background, non-tech, but they're smart, they're savvy, they're detailed. Could someone just jump into an account manager role? Coming from that, what does that look like?
It's happened before. Sometimes it's gone well if they were well suited for that particular role, and sometimes it's not. So, some of the conversations, a very good example, I had a conversation just yesterday with someone who had come from something that was not a very complex sale, even though it was in a technical industry, and they moved to a very large software company. Some folks might refer to them as, a more legacy software company, like, by that I mean like a Broadcom or a, IBM or an SAP, and they were struggling. And there's just a lot to learn. So I always advise, there's a lot to learn. Let me just qualify what I mean by that. There's a lot to learn in terms of the tech itself. And then depending upon the environment that you're kind of stepping into or where you're coming from, that can be a whole nother job and just trying to navigate your way through that landscape. So if someone's coming from something that's a non-traditional background, I want to try to minimize as many of those variables as I can. So my suggestion is always to look at, maybe there's a SDR or an inside sales rep role that you can transition into to just kind of learn the tech space that you're in. Learn how the deals are structured, learn how we qualify business, because those are all transferable skills. And you can do that for 6 to 12 to 18 months to 2 years if you like. But then once you've had that level of training and engagement with customers and running presentation and coordinating teams and all that, now you can move into what I would think is a more traditional account management role. So it's not to say that you couldn't do that. There's always some company that, will do that. I don't always advise that. Even if someone's been working in pharma for, 10 years and they want to make it, I say, hey, put yourself in a position, either you're in an SDR role to get that experience or inside sales role, or the manager that you're working for understands the amount of investment that they're going to have to make in you in order to kind of get you up to speed. I have people like that are on my team, but I hired them because they had a high aptitude for what we're doing. They had demonstrated success in prior roles that they had, and we made a mutual investment. They made an investment. I was going to be making an investment, and so I know that their ramp time is going to be a little bit longer. It is really like it's called tech because there's a lot to learn, right? I always advise, it's like learning a new language, right? It's like, you step into a room and people are talking about, there's all these acronyms and, fundamental knowledge that, you're not an engineer. I have a marketing degree. You have to learn that tech. You have to understand the value proposition of that tech, and you have to learn how to communicate in that language, right? And so it's a big ask. It's a big jump, but if you're willing to make that investment and you have a team that's supporting you that is willing to make that investment, it can be a very lucrative decision for you.
So you actually answered the other follow-on question I was going to ask. It sounds complex, right? The software technology sale. Some folks might be thinking, oh, I got to be an engineer. I have to have a technical background, to do this. So I think you answered that, but maybe could you expand on that a little bit more? If folks are like, oh, hey, I'm a teacher. This is actually a previous webinar. I think some folks were in education or they're in banking. It might be afraid to go into tech because it seems daunting. I guess what would you maybe expand on that a little bit more?
So there's a difference between, so when we say tech sales, you can be an engineer. So the folks on my team, the enterprise account managers, and then they have a peer that's the engineer. And the way that they work, like the engineer has the fundamental technical training, in the technology. They've gone to school for it, they've graduated with it, right? So, you couldn't jump out of unless you did a lot of certification training, and this has happened as well. We've had people that actually have gotten a lot of certifications and moved into an engineering role. It's a little bit more challenging though, if you haven't had some type of formal structured training for some period of time, but that does happen. We're talking about the enterprise account manager role. So that skill set, you have to be able to demonstrate some fundamental skills is what I look for, right? So can you be a teacher? Absolutely. Persistence, right? If you reached out to me, you say, hey, and this happens a lot, people reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to understand about opportunities that might exist at HashiCorp, and I sell cars today, right? Classic example, that's no different than what my reps do or I might do on an everyday basis when I need to try to talk to a customer about something or a prospect about something. But I don't assume that just because that person didn't respond to me, within hours of me sending it, that I'm going to get a response. I have to be persistent. I have to go, as a rep, you have to keep going back. Sometimes I don't respond just because I'm traveling or I don't have bandwidth. So I kind of know instantly, like the people who really want it, because they'll keep coming back to me. And usually it's not because I'm not interested. It's just like, I've got a lot of things that I've got to prioritize. And then I eventually do circle back. But that's a fundamental skill that you've got to have, right? Or able, right? To be able to demonstrate, like, I'm persistent because I set this goal, and despite all of the obstacles that I encountered, I was able to overcome it. Like, that's got to be hardwired, because that's what we do. We don't sell people things that they don't want, but we also understand that our priorities might not be their priorities at that moment, right? So it's just a fundamental thing you got to have wired into you.
And that's non-technical, right?
That's not technical,
skill, right?
That's applicable across anything that you did, right? So when I'm talking to candidates about a role on my team, I'm looking for, it's great if you have the experience and you've demonstrated that at some company, but I have a couple folks, like I said, from non-traditional backgrounds that are on my team now. I was looking for things that demonstrated that they were persistent or that they had overcome challenges in the past, right? Problem-solving skills, right? That's not tech industry specific, right? I hired someone on my team that ran on the PTA. Now, they had a background in tech, it's unrelated to what we do, but problem solving, you're working in PTA or you're a high school coach, you're going to have some problems, right? To overcome, right? You got to have soft skills. You have to have interpersonal skills, right? Conflict resolution skills. Those things are very, very important to our role as well. You have to be a person that is, particularly in a space that we operate in with everything changing so much. You have to be, we always say this thing, you folks might hear it, be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're never going to get to a place in your career, and particularly not in this business, where you know everything. There's always should be someone that's smarter than you at the table. If I'm in a room and I'm the smartest person in that room, we got big problems, right? You always are going to work with people that are bringing something to the table that you may not have a background in, right? So working with those types of diverse groups, we all know, factually true, create the best problems or the best solutions. So those are important skills, right? The ability to be comfortable with ambiguity in an environment where things are constantly changing, where you've got to be astute on new developments that are occurring within the industry, blockchain, cloud, automation, all of these buzzwords out there. You just got to be a student of the game, as we say, right? And so it's a constant, constantly being challenged to like stay current. So those are all qualities. If you tell me like, no, I'm not comfortable with change, like I've had, a different boss every year, and I just want to go back to my cube and nothing change, and my responsibilities to be, this isn't the right place for you. Because when you work in hyper growth environments, very dynamic environments, which is what we're talking about. We're talking about cloud sales or cloud automation. That's the environment that we have to exist in. That's what cutting edge companies, that's the environment that they're operating in, right? So you got to be comfortable with those things.
Oh, that's a lot of good information, Sam. The change, it resonates with me. I kind of half joke for folks, I've been with HashiCorp for about 4 years. Folks who've joined within the last year, I joke, they probably know about the same as me because things change so much just within our technology and products, not to mention the industry, as a whole. So this is a good segue. Thank you to the audience member who just asked the question. And folks, please feel free to submit questions. We'd love to get to it. This kind of relates to your military background, Sam. This person was asking, what military skills did you obtain while serving that kind of helped you excel in this role?
It's discipline. And thanks, Frank. Frank sent me a private note to say, hey, Sam, look at the camera. And I apologize if I haven't been making the direct eye contact.
I'm reminding myself.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, it's discipline, right? It's, what is discipline? Discipline is doing what you need to do regularly, frequently, and even when no one is looking, right? So it's, my discipline, I get up, 5 out of 7 days a week. I go to the gym, to relieve my stress, right? That's something that's ingrained. It's a part of my healthy lifestyle. Discipline is making sure that your forecast is up to date by a certain time, every week, so that management can review that and make decisions about the business based on the numbers that you're forecasting, right? I had to at one point in my career think about the impact that the Marines had on me, and that idea of discipline. Most of us think of it in a bad way. It's a positive thing. It's how you ensure some level of consistency because you're doing it all the time, right? I realized that most people, like, how do you learn discipline? Like, unless you've been in a type of environment where it was taught to you. And so when I really reflected back on it, it's like, that's really where I learned to be sometimes almost robotic about things I know have to get done. Like, for example, paying your bills, you got to pay them, right? You have to have a discipline about managing your books, right? Nobody's perfect at any of these areas, but the awareness of the need to have that to reduce risk and ensure, some level of linearity or consistency is really important. So I kind of, there are a lot of things I learned in the Marines. There's some leadership traits that I trace back to my time in the Marines as well, but discipline is probably the biggest one. And, if I hadn't had that training in the Marine Corps, it's, unlikely that I'd even, be in this industry or in this role.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you for answering the question, for asking the question as well. So Sam, this is kind of I think a good kind of segue to the next piece. In the previous webinar, we've had folks on our team actually with military backgrounds, actually related to that, right? We have a good crew there. We have folks that came from actually bartending. We have folks that came from non-traditional backgrounds. And I guess specifically, can you speak to what are some transferable skills? How do people translate their skills in this, quote unquote, non-traditional background into one that is tech sales? Could you give some examples?
So some of the things that we talked about, and I'll kind of make some, I'll rattle off a few of these things and maybe talk a little bit about, we talked about persistence, right? Being able to demonstrate those qualities. I put one on here because this is just something that is near to me, which is be fearless, right? You can't be afraid of being told no, regardless of what it is that you're pursuing in this life. Nobody's gonna just give you something. No one's gonna just willingly turn it over, right? So you've got to be confident and unafraid to ask for what you want, right? We'll have interviews with candidates, and we're in sales, folks, like, and whether you call it direct sales, I think we sell every day. You have an idea, you want to persuade someone to do something, you're married, your spouse wants to go one place, you want to go another. Like, you got to negotiate that, you got to work through that, right? Those are all basic fundamental interpersonal skills. We do it every day, only I get paid to do it, right? So but so those are the things that we're looking for. But we'll have interviews with candidates who seasoned candidates at that, like folks that have made $300,000-$400,000 a year consistently over the past 8 or 9 years, interview with us in front of a panel and not ask about, the objections, right? Do you have any objections or any concerns about my ability to meet the requirements for this role? Objection handling is a fundamental skill, right, of any salesperson. I don't care if you're selling real estate, cars, tennis shoes. I don't like that color. Or what are you trying to wear it with, right? We do that every day. So we'll have these interviews, and sometimes those folks will close out their meeting without closing salespeople. Like, that's the worst, in my opinion. That's like the worst thing that you could do. And I don't care. You could, like, I don't care if you were, the PTA president, student council, whatever. Close me. Go out and watch Glenn Ross if you've not seen that excellent sales movie, which should be required viewing in high school and college, right? ABC, always be closing, right? It's a salesman's and a saleswoman's, a salesperson's mantra, right? So you're meeting with that manager, that can get you a second interview, usually a second interview, and sometimes it'll get you a job, and sometimes it will get you out of a job. Because those people that didn't close us at the end, I'm like, no, I don't care how good that was. That is so fundamental. It's like, you have to do that. So that's really important. The attention to detail, and then we talked about this, just being an active listener, being able to understand what they're saying, but also sometimes what they're not saying, right? Because it's, that you have to be just as attentive to what they're not saying sometimes, because people don't always tell you what is, as one of my aunts would say.
So a bit of balance, aggressive persistence, but also listening, as well. So this might be a good transition. Another guest asked this question. They're a fellow Spartan, so go green, and I'll read exactly what they're saying here. What could we be doing now to prepare ourselves best outside of these ingrained skills and personality sets to set ourselves up to be a candidate that stands out? For someone applying with the same role, but they have a tech background, but they don't, but the person doesn't. How can they stand out?
How can they stand out against someone who has a tech background?
And outside of these, persistence, always be closing, attention to detail, kind of these, I'll say more personality traits, the soft skill.
Yeah, I think you have to think about what you're doing as a sales campaign, right? This is a sales campaign. Like, you're trying to get a job, so you're trying to, that's your sale. What's the product, right? The product is you, right? And what you bring to the table. And so everything in my mind to secure that initial interview, the second interview, the third interview, is everything that I would need to do, or one of my reps would need to do in their sales campaign. And so, to me, to stand out, you need to demonstrate your understanding of how to do that, how to work through that sales campaign, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a seasoned person or if you're a person from outside the business, right? So prospecting, right? What are the list of companies that I'm going to talk to and why, right? I should understand that. So I'm going to develop that. I'm going to have my list of people to reach out to, and then I'm going to have my initial outreach. Hi, Sam, I'm really interested in understanding or learning more about HashiCorp and the role that you're hiring for, right? And typically, I'll actually take those calls, right? I mean, I could say, hey, go talk to this recruiting person. Most of the time, I take those calls unless I'm, really, really underwater with things, because I want to understand. I'm curious, number one, because that happens, but it doesn't happen all the time, right? So now you've already started to distinguish yourself, right? In that conversation, I'm going to ask you, what are some of the other companies that you're looking at? Because I also want to understand, like, have you really done some homework and really thought through why you want to contact these companies? That's really important to me to understand. Like, no, if I don't work here, I'm going to go back to selling cars. Well, that's not really a good answer for me, right? But if it's companies like HashiCorp that are, relevant to the cloud space, right? That's going to show some forethought, some preparation, right? give me a, oh, I don't know, like that's a bad answer, right? You haven't done any homework, right? And then if you've done something like pull something out of my history, which people sometimes do, like, oh, Sam, I see you do Ironman, I see you in the Marine Corps or Go Green. That's all good stuff. That's the same stuff that my people do and that I do. I'm looking for some common thread there to establish that relationship, right? I'm going to ask you for some time to meet. And then when they go into the time, like, this is why I reached out to you, right? This is what I'd like to understand. Show me that you've done some homework there about the company. This is why I'm really interested in cloud automation. This is where the market is going. I know I don't have the background, but here are all of the things that I've done to prepare for this moment and to prepare for this transition. Really, really important. You've made an investment, right? You've made an investment in your time. You didn't have to go to a library. You didn't have to go buy a bunch of books. All you sat down and did is you committed the time, Googled in stuff, and started reading. And now you can ask intelligent questions, right? You don't have to know everything. So, I'm just kind of laying out how this goes. That's what impresses me, because most of the people, even if they are seasoned, they forget that it really comes down to that relationship at the end of the day. Yes, you have to know something, but you have to be thoughtful in your approach. And so all the stuff that I'm talking about, you don't need 20 years to learn. It's how you establish relationships with people in general, right? And then if I didn't, if I had to reschedule, or, if I didn't respond right away, you kept coming back, right? Or, which is real cool, like if you have people do this, they start seeing what your circle of influence is, and they start hitting up people in your circle of influence, right? Now that's sales. That's like, you're good, right? I had a guy who wanted to be on my team. I liked him. That was, we were in process, and he got positive feedback from everybody that he interviewed with. We happened to be at an offsite, and I was talking to one of my peers, and he was like, hey, did you talk to this guy? It's like, yeah, he's calling me right now. Like, the guy was calling to kind of come back and say, hey, yeah, I had a good meeting. Like, he was like that, he was doing that. So that was really impressive to me, because that's what we do, right? We try to figure out, how do we get to these people? How do we circle them with people who can say good things about our technology and our solution, people that will give us good references, and move the ball forward, right? So those are all, again, not to belabor the point, but those are the things that we do. And again, you don't have to have 20 years of experience in order to master those skills.
Makes sense, Sam. I think that's a lot of good information. Do your homework. That's something that anyone can do. And then build relationships. And that guy was closing, right? He was coming around and closing. So I guess, if I may insert a little bit, the previous person that asked that question, I think going off of what Sam was saying, to differentiate yourself, build that network, build those relationships. I don't know what the stat is. Someone smarter than me can tell me, but referrals are a better way than just a blind application on the website, right? Build a relationship with a hiring manager, with someone like you. I guess, Sam, maybe to go off of that, this is kind of related. Another question from the audience, appreciate that. How can I approach doing a self-assessment so I can see what kind of gaps I have and work to close them? This is a bit more general, but I think what would you say to that?
So the question is, how do I know what my gaps are?
Yeah. How do I do a self-assessment to figure out those gaps?
I think it starts with you having a conversation with your prospects. What are you looking for this role? That all of the requirements for the role are they're public, right? So you can reach out to the recruiter, or in a lot of cases, you can reach out to an RVP in that region and request time, to ask questions about that role. But the only way you get that feedback is by putting it out there, right? This is who I am, right? And then at the end of that conversation is, do you have any concerns, right? And most managers are very transparent, like about, what they're looking for, but you have to get those objections on the table so that you can address them, right? So to answer your question, the best thing to do is to sit down, look at the requirements, look at how you stack up against the requirements, and develop your story, right? And that's a real important part of this is storytelling. What's the narrative that goes with how you got to, how you started from where you started to why we're sitting here today? What's the story that puts all of these organizations, dates, what you were doing? How does all that shape you for this moment that you're in right now in front of me? Like, be able to tell that story. And then what's the value that you think that you can bring to the table? What is it? What's a unique thing about you that will help me to attain my goals as a leader, right? Well, what are your goals, right? Well, we need to, build pipeline. Well, I'm fearless with working the phone or, doing outreach, right? Or learning about automation that will help support my outreach, right? Like, all of those things get me interested, because it's like I'm looking to build an all-star team, and I'm looking for someone that can bring something to the table that I don't already have to help the team meet its goals, right? So you've got to be able to sit down, craft that story. And I would say that, look, to fail fast, we say that's a big phrase in tech, right? You want to get beta product out there because you want people to give you feedback on how you need to improve it. You're the product, right? So put yourself out there, have that conversation, ask them, what are your objections? And I might say, look, you might not be a good fit for my team, but I'm happy to facilitate an intro to this other person over here who's a hiring manager for another role that I think better aligns with what your current skills are, right? But now you've opened up that dialogue. That happens all the time in our sales too. Yeah, that product doesn't fit what we're looking for, but there's another team within our organization I think, has this need over here. Would you mind sending an email to intro? Oh yeah, okay, that's what you want. Now you're in the game, right? You've got a reference, you got somebody that's going to facilitate an intro, take it, keep running, right? Keep asking for objections until people say, no, I don't have any question about your qualifications to meet what we're looking for. That's it. Now you're in, right? But that's how you get that self-assessment that you're talking about. Put yourself out there, have that conversation, fail fast. Whoa, that was a disaster of an interview. Wow. Okay, now I know what I need to prep for. The biggest thing, be fearless. Like, don't be afraid. You're going to get told no. What you have doesn't meet it 1,000 times. You have to be successful, right? But you don't make 100% of the shots that you don't take.
There we go. I think that's huge, Sam. I think it's, something my folks tell me, like, don't deny yourself. Don't say no to yourself, keep going, and do that. I guess this relates to a couple other things, Sam, too. And, I realized, so we got about 6-7 minutes at the end. I think we had some quick poll questions. I was wondering if we get that out to the audience, get some quick answers on there. It'll be maybe just take 10 seconds of the audience's time. So if we could get some polls out there, that'd be great. We can kind of see, Sam, what folks are coming from. But let's go a little bit tactical. I think we talked about this a little bit. Is okay, I'm in education, I'm a bartender, I'm coming from the military, whatever the non-tech background is. What are some tactical things, phrases in my resume? I'm applying to a tech sales job now that can translate. I'm not familiar, what are some little quick hits that some folks can do?
Yeah, I think the critical skills of, I feel like I'm maybe beating a horse right here, but like, how have you demonstrated your ability to overcome challenges in your past, right? Whatever those challenges might be, right? Give me, an example of a time where you had to resolve a conflict to achieve an optimal outcome, right? Those are all behavioral questions, right? I want to understand, if someone is coming from a non-traditional background, what I'm looking for is something that demonstrates that this person has really the grit in order to kind of work in this field. That means that you've had something that you've had to kind of overcome to get to where you are right now. Like, you're taking a risk, right? Is it just money that you're pursuing here? Is there some, what's the story, right? And so I guess if I were to kind of boil it down, there's like the basic stuff that you kind of look for, like, how do you, I'm going to want to know, like, tell me about your discovery process. If tell me, let's just take the example of selling cars, for example, because it just comes to me readily, right? Like, tell me about your discovery process to help you understand what your customers' needs are, right? Right. I can make the bridge to what you're doing to what I do, right? Or what we do. I need to understand what you do, right? And that's my role. My role is to kind of, if I'm hiring somebody from a non-traditional background, my role is to kind of say, you know what, they do this, or they're very ambitious, or they've taken risks before, right? And they made an investment, and they were able to demonstrate the investment that was was required to make that transition successful, right? So those are the things. You folks on the call understand what we kind of are managing and what we're kind of dealing with on a day-to-day basis. We talked about objection handling, we talked about prospecting. Those are the things that you need to be able to talk to in your outreach to me, right? And again, I can't impress upon you enough, what is the narrative that goes with you, right? I don't know if that answers your question. There's no magic sauce here. We're doing some basic fundamental things in our everyday life, but you got to be able to kind of talk to how those things are going to bring something to the table that I'm trying to address. Discovery, right? After you've kind of introduced yourself, a great question is, can you give me some insight into what are some of the goals that you're driving the team or leading the team to overachieve on this year, right? Because
this is the applicant asking the interviewer.
Asking me what's important to me, right? And that's a little bit of there's no prep for that necessarily, right? I can tell you that we're all trying to build our pipeline. Pipeline is like the amount of deals that we're forecasting, right? We're trying to build that. The bigger pipeline that you have, the higher the probability that you're going to be able to meet the number that you've been given, the goal or the quota that you've been given, right? So we're all challenged with that. We're all challenged with, developing relationships with the right people, right? If that's something that you can bring to the table. There are other things that you're probably not going to be as good at doing just because you're from outside of the industry. But, those are opportunities to learn what's important to that manager, and then to be able to, on the fly, kind of speak to how you might be able to help that manager do that, right? If you're a leader now, that's always this is going back to like being in school, companies recruited from Michigan State, and it was well known and recognized that, hey, you need to demonstrate you can get good grades, but you also need to be a leader, a peer leader, right? So you get involved with, for me, it was a MSU Marketing Association, right? I knew that that's what they were looking for. It's they're looking for leaders. They're looking for, I'm not going to come in and lead a department, but they want someone who's demonstrated, above and beyond leadership, above their peers, right? Because they have leadership potential within our organization once they know, the ropes, once they learn the ropes. So anytime you're that, I don't, again, you could be, hey, I lead the union, or I lead, I'm a coach, or what are you doing? The person I hired was a PTA president, right? She was getting back into the workforce after, having raised her kids for a number of years, right? But that was okay, yeah, this person has the right DNA, right? So I'm looking for those qualities. And again, I don't think I'm dropping knowledge here, but it's all fundamental, right?
Makes sense. No, Sam, that's great. And Sam, I know we only got a couple minutes, but one thing I really want to drive into that you covered about maybe 10, 20 minutes ago, you had interviewed folks that you're willing to invest in, and
Sure.
that you saw were willing to invest. It might be safe to say that is not always the case with leaders and hiring managers. How does one find someone like a Sam Terrell, right, that is willing to invest? How does that happen? Or it's I find that that's critical in growth, right, in the applicant
Right.
as well.
Yeah. It's even in my profession, we have to locate the change, what we refer to as the change agents. These are people who have influence. They are well regarded and they have some level of I don't want to say the word, if the word is freedom, but they have the ability, because they have that influence, they're able to introduce change or help an organization adopt something different, right? A change agent, a person who leads change. How do you find change agent? I have to find that as part of my sales cycle. How do you find someone like me? I say this a lot, and folks that are outside of the industry don't. I give them I give them a pass, but I do share this. Get on LinkedIn. Period. Okay, LinkedIn is a almost like Facebook for the business community, right? For those folks that are maybe 3 degrees away from kind of what we do, but it's where business people post what they're doing, what's important to them, things that they're involved in, and about your professional life. You're not putting, mostly pictures of your kids up or things like that, but it's all business oriented, right? Even if it's a basic profile, spend some time, get your profile up on LinkedIn. It's how recruiters find you. I'm on LinkedIn, and the people that I care about professionally are on LinkedIn, right? And it's part of my network, right? So it's as simple as doing searches on LinkedIn. So what are things that I'm a change agent, right? What are things that change agents have in their bios that are searchable? ERG, right? This is an ERG. This is, we didn't talk a lot about it, but this is something that I'm involved in. I'm involved in a number of communities, because we're trying to introduce change into the organizations, or support the change that our organizations are driving, right? All the groups that I'm involved in, all of the little affinity groups, you're doing searches on things like that. So go to my profile, pull out some keywords, pull out pipeline, pull out forecast, pull out, presentation. Those are all searchable things, right? To kind of start with a list, and then you can start to narrow that list based on what your interest is. So it's easier than what it was 20 years ago when we didn't have LinkedIn. But now everybody's got their information. It's almost like looking for somebody on Facebook, right? How you find people on Facebook, right? A city, a name, Google it, put it in a search bar. You do the same thing. So it's a little bit of research that's going to be involved there. But if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you can find everything that I'm interested in professionally, right? So that's the way that you find them, to answer your question in short. So get on LinkedIn. I'm going to leave something else here. Make the investment in kind of your presence. Like we were joking earlier about looking in the camera. That's a skill I got to work on. I have a tendency to look at your picture on my monitor.
Same here. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I probably should have just moved your face to the center here, but that's a skill. But make the time to invest in your brand, your image, right? Because a lot of our sales nowadays, and it's going to continue to be this way, it's going to be online. So we all got to get comfortable and get used to talking to people. Like that old show when I was a kid, the Jetsons, like they had monitors and that's how they interacted with the world. Get used to that, right? So make the investment, go buy a good camera. Happy to post a camera that I use if you guys like it. It's a Via, it's an HD camera. I've had interviews with people who are interviewing for a role on my team, and yes, it might be an older laptop, older hardware, but you got to make that investment, right? And a good camera, good mic setup so that your image comes across, almost like your business card used to be, right? When you go buy a new shirt because you got an interview, this is your presence. And I'm wearing this. I'm not wearing kind of my collared shirt and all that because I wanted to promote my blacksmiths, but those things are really important. Getting on LinkedIn and making sure that, you're coming across Chris, you have a value prop. Why am I talking to you? How can you help me? Those are all things that you can do to kind of make sure you get that interview.
Awesome. Oh, Sam. So yeah, do your homework, prep, right? There's a lot of things folks can do. And Sam, we didn't get to cover this. Would you mind talking about the Blacksmith ERG very quickly? This is a Blacksmith production. So if you could talk through that real quick, sure. And then I think we can close off.
Yeah, sure. Blacksmith ERG, the goal of that is to promote the recruitment, retention, and the professional development of folks of African descent at HashiCorp. We do a lot of programs, sponsor a lot of programs that highlight things that our members are doing within their community, employees of HashiCorp, as well as a lot of outward facing programs, within the community for underrepresented groups, et cetera. We also partner with other ERGs that are, for example, it's Women of HashiCorp. There's a lot of fantastic programs, the Indigenous Peoples ERG. So we're one of the active organizations. We're one of the first. Women of HashiCorp was the first, and then I think we launched shortly thereafter. We launched during the George Foreman and Breonna Taylor protests, and really the impetus for that was we wanted to feel like we were doing something, right? As opposed to, just kind of seeing what was happening and jumping on our next conference call. I wanted to feel empowered. And so the Blacksmith is what we created, signed our logo, and now we have all these wonderful programs that highlight, what our members are doing, as well as the value that we're bringing to the communities that we represent. So,
great, Sam. Thank you. I mean, that's why I joined. Definitely want to improve the world, every little bit that we can. So with that, I think we'll close very quickly. Remember to complete the survey. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. One additional thing I want to call out: we have some amazing folks on the Blacksmiths community that volunteered to talk with anyone on this call for about 45 minutes. This is not formal career counseling, quick caveat, but they are smart, great people that would be happy to talk to you. We'll connect folks. Just go ahead and respond, like a yes in the survey. Trudy and I will work on connecting folks. With that, Sam, first and foremost, thank you so much for your time, for your experience and in your season to provide everyone. And then also, obviously, thank you to HashiCorp for providing this forum. We are a leader in cloud software to help folks connect to the cloud more securely, in a more automated, secure fashion. And thank you to Trudy Curto, Danny Jimenez on our employee branding and comms team for being behind the scenes and making sure we look good. So thank you, Trudy and Danny. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll close, answer the survey. We'll get this on YouTube shortly as well. So again, thanks, everyone.
We'll connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you. All right.
There we go. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Trudy.